The last 2 decades of the 20th century were a golden age of technology. The rise of cell phones, the World Wide Web, personal computing, autonomous drones.
Change is occurring so rapidly that even those involved find it difficult to keep pace.
Witnessing every milestone was the TV series Beyond 2000. Its presenters travelled the globe, searching for innovations that would give us a glimpse into the future. Now that we're in the future, it's time to look back at the tech that did and didn't change the world. From the iconic to the offbeat.
Ready?
We're travelling back.
Fire.
Before 2000. Speed is part of our DNA.
I think there's something about feeling the forces of speed on the human body that feels so strange and yet exhilarating that everyone wants at least a small part of it.
In the 80s and 90s, transportation was being reimagined, fueled by the tech revolution and a cultural obsession with speed.
The 80s and 90s were all about really moving faster. Everything was happening to just improve the way we were getting around the place.
With new materials that were stronger and lighter, it seemed the sky wasn't the limit, but the starting point.
And I think that's present across the decades, but it's definitely something you can see in the races to make the best, the fastest, you know, the lightest, whether it's a flying machine or whether it's something on the sea or on land.
If it was cutting edge and mildly dangerous, all the better, as we raced towards an era defined by the need for speed. Only a rare breed have the horsepower and chutzpah to break the land speed record. Englishman Richard Noble reached a blistering 1,019 kilometres an hour back in 1983.
Oh, it's the most exciting thing on God's earth. Ace, absolutely great. Really lovely.
But in Australia, the Aussie Invader 2 was hoping to steal a little thunder from the Brits.
The average family car puts out something like 100 to 150 horsepower. A Formula One car produces about 800 horsepower. But at world record speed, the Aussie Invader will produce about 30,000 horsepower. Now that's more power than the 6 Mackies lined up behind me, at a speed that is faster than the cruising speed of a Boeing 747.
Essentially, when you're going at that speed, the car wants to take off, and that can be very dangerous. You also have to deal with drag, and you have to maintain stability. And when you're going at that speed, it can be really hard to stay on course.
If you've ever taken the wheel of a bicycle and spun it in your hands and then turned it from side to side, you'll understand what gyroscopic forces are all about. Any change in the alignment of the wheel and it wants to tilt over, just like that. Consider the fact that the wheels of the Aussie Invader 2 will be spinning at more than 7,000 revs per minute. It's been calculated that a mere 0.05 of a degree of turn in the wheels will ultimately cause the vehicle to flip over.
I would say this has been the safest land speed vehicle that's ever been built. All the roll cage area is made out of 95 wall tubing, and it's, you know, I've said to people when the thing was built, if I couldn't sit in it and be pushed off a 5-storey building and just walk away unscathed, well, you know, I didn't want to sit in the thing.
So the other challenge with breaking a land speed record is that you need a huge distance that's incredibly smooth, incredibly flat, and you've got room to brake. Because once you get up to that speed, you've got to maintain it long enough to break the record, but then you've got to be able to slow down as well without the whole thing disintegrating. And there's very few surfaces or locations that exist where that can be done. So that's part of the challenge, is where do you even test one of these things?
Driver Roscoe McGlashan attempted the record in December 1993. But poor track conditions meant he couldn't quite crack it. 4 months later, the Aussie Invader did break the Australian land speed record at just over 800 kilometres an hour. It still stands today.
I'm dialed in with everything that's happening on the car, and It's really, doing the record's going to be the easiest part of the whole operation.
In the military, velocity can be the difference between life and death, turning precious seconds into advantages or daring escapes. In Key West, Florida, only 150 kilometres from Cuba, the US Navy wanted the ability to react with lightning speed. In 1985, this strategically located naval base was the home of the Navy's hydrofoil missile ship, the fastest warship in the world.
So the advantage of this design is that it's able to lift itself out of water effectively, and it means that you're creating less drag, you're able to go faster, use less energy, and get to where you need to go quicker. And it was different to other military boats because the other military boats were typically bigger and slower and really not anywhere near as agile as these.
It could operate at peak speed in almost any sort of seas, while also providing a stable weapons platform, a huge perk over conventional warships.
The United States Navy says that these ships can travel in excess of 40 knots. The International Defense Review says it's in excess of 50 knots. Whichever's correct, it's pretty darn fast. And they're supposed to be able to travel at that speed for something like 1,000 kilometers. And with the same firepower as a frigate, it makes them a pretty formidable warship. So they should be, but they cost around $100 million each.
A year later, it was the US Army in the limelight, with the most advanced attack helicopter ever created, the Apache.
It is a sad state of affairs that so many innovations do actually come out of our desire to try and kill people as efficiently and cheaply as possible. And I guess the Apache helicopter really was and still is a technological marvel.
Any target, any known enemy target, within the range of this aircraft can be defeated.
At $10 million each, they were the most expensive helicopters ever built.
The 2.75 folding fin rockets, which is probably our longest range armament, and we have a semi-active laser Hellfire missile here, and the aircraft is designed to carry up to 16 of these missiles. And underneath the aircraft is the 30-millimeter chain gun.
Combining speed with firepower and accuracy, the Apache was the deadliest rotorcraft in the sky.
Well, the Army couldn't be happier with the Apache. It's exceeded all of the design specification requirements that they laid down for the manufacturer, and it's apparently streets ahead of the Soviet equivalent aircraft behind, as well as any other international helicopter on the immediate horizon. There are other super helicopters on the drawing boards, the Army's so-called LHX series of helicopters, but they're well in the future. And as far as attack helicopters are concerned, the Apache seems certain to be on center stage until well into the 21st century.
What we do find with technologies like this is that so many of the innovations that went into their construction find their way into other aspects of everyday use. Although hopefully less deadly functions of the Apache helicopter might have actually emerged in day-to-day technology, but it was an extraordinary innovation for its time.
The 80s were marked by Cold War tensions, and military might came in all forms, even ones we weren't supposed to see.
So it was termed the Blackbird, and the design was fantastic. Like, it really looked like a stealth piece of machinery, and it was designed in that way to be undetectable. At that type of height, no one ever knew it was coming, so it was able to get between places not only extremely quickly at extreme heights, but also without being detected.
This is the fastest plane in the world that we know of, the enigmatic SR-71, the Blackbird, a plane that can literally fly as fast as a bullet, sustaining speeds of Mach 3, that's about 3,300 kilometers an hour. Everything about this extraordinary aircraft broke new ground, but it was the thermodynamics that initially confounded the crack team of 200 designers. At altitudes of about 80,000 feet or 24,400 meters, the outside air temperature is minus 56 degrees Celsius. But even in those conditions, the coolest part of the airframe is hotter than a domestic hot plate, and the rest of the aircraft glows white hot.
It was unique for its time because when it actually took to the sky, engineering had commenced quite some time before that. So they ended up using a titanium alloy on the external skin that basically shielded an interior aluminium frame. So even if you did see one of these in the sky, it would only be very brief because it would fly over very fast. But it was this technology that made it able to go that speed and also made it so that it wasn't detectable by radar.
The SR-71 reached a mind-melting 3,500 kilometres an hour, the fastest for a non-rocket powered aircraft.
The surveillance, it was the ultimate tool. And if you fast forward to today, we have satellites that are able to take photos of, coins on the ground from space. You have drones. So this technology really isn't as useful anymore.
And while the Blackbird had kept the American aviators in the fast lane, the Russians weren't about to be left behind. Dr. Caroline West went behind the curtain at the MiG factory in Russia to take one for a spin.
The MiG was a pretty extraordinary development of its time, and it still holds true today. Extraordinary technology designed to really defeat the limitations of air, of gravity, of speed, all of those things that were really holding us back and will always hold us back.
MiG pilots regularly endure up to 9 Gs of acceleration, so Caroline was in for the ride of her life.
I'm about to join an elite team of pilots who take to the skies in the MiG-25 jet superfighter. 30 seconds after takeoff, we'll be at the cruising altitude of a jumbo jet, pulling a whopping 5 Gs. That's 5 times the force of gravity here on Earth. So, wish me luck.
MiG fighter planes had been in Soviet service since World War II, but constant improvements saw the MiG-29s become one of the most advanced jet fighters in the world.
Pulling 5 Gs was an extraordinary feeling. The stress on my body felt like a massive weight. That was just extraordinary flying. Just the trip of a lifetime. Just the best. Thank you very much. Спасибо.
The factory may have been a little rustic, but they were able to produce quality jets quickly.
It came to economies of scale as well. MiGs were cheaper to produce, and the Russians wanted to pump these out as quickly as they could, so you could get more of these out without having to wait around. So that was an advantage too.
The Cold War over, we bonded with our comrades over a warplane.
So I can be your co-pilot? Yes.
Yes. The thrill of speeding across the water has captured the imagination of enthusiasts all over the world in vessels of all shapes and forms. But in 1996, one left all the rest in its wake.
I'm taking a ride in the world's fastest V-bottom boat. It's all about racing drivers and their machines pushing themselves to the outer limit and the quest to fulfill the need for speed.
Water speed records began with steam and propeller-driven vessels in the late 19th century. Fast forward 100 years, and it was all about petrol-powered water rockets.
Water speed records are won by going as fast as you can in a straight line. And in theory, it sounds pretty straightforward. You cram some big engines into a boat and then you just go in a straight line. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work out as simple as that.
In 1994, the boat Ohio Steel was the world's fastest V-bottom vessel, clocking in a run of 210 kilometres an hour.
To give this yellow monster the sort of performance bravado it craves, there's not one, not two, but 3 supercharged 1,000 horsepower engines. That packs a punch by anyone's standards. And at top speed, it chews through a staggering 300 gallons or 1,300 litres of racing fuel an hour.
But it was the Ohio Steel's hull that gave the boat the edge. Incredibly, it was full of tiny holes. Rather than sinking, these holes allowed the boat to fly.
This mega racer literally rides along on a bed of bubbles. Through 2 vents on either side of the boat, air is sucked in and mixed with water underneath, creating a layer of fine foam. And that offers a lot less resistance than water, so the boat can glide over the surface with a lot less drag.
So there are huge engines to achieve the amount of torque that's required to move this thing across the water. But once it gets to a certain point, it's virtually skating above the water.
This delicate engineering balance was all in the name of speed.
You want it to be moving with enough pace to lift the front so that the engines can actually propel the water beneath the vehicle. But then as the speeds pick up, it is then a case of controlling the load on it so that it doesn't flip over. So there's a lot of criteria you have to achieve, but it can all go wrong pretty quickly.
From a holy hull to a super skinny one.
The VSV, or Very Slender Vessel, was a triumph of design because of the way that it could just cut through waves. It was highly maneuverable, it was expertly designed with a lot of attention paid to the details of it so that it had maximum movement and maneuverability while staying really small and nimble.
Hitting well over 100 kilometres per hour in rough weather with a heavy load, this boat was not built to go over the waves, but through them.
The key to the boat's astonishing performance, apart from its cigar-like shape, are these spray rails, or small ledges that run the whole length of the vessel and get progressively wider as you get towards the aft end of the boat. And they improve the boat's stability as well as controlling its fore and aft trim. And since they've launched the vessel, they've added this small extra lip. It's a curved, hooked ledge, if you like, that runs the rest of the way towards the stern of the boat. And that has dramatically improved the boat's turning ability.
It was built to achieve excellent speeds, but it was also built for stealthiness. And funnily enough, while it was used a lot by military, in this day and age, it's actually used a lot by drug smugglers who are trying to not be seen by coastal guards because they're able to then traffic all of their drugs without anyone noticing.
This was no pleasure boat. Its high speed and low radar signature made it the perfect stealth vessel.
These vessels are also small enough that they can avoid radar detection, or at least do so better than a lot of other vehicles. That means they've gained popularity in the military for the UK and Singapore. There's also satellite surveillance that suggests that North Korea are making VSVs. However, we don't have full confirmation on that.
The Very Slender Vessel was the definition of a boat that had a need for speed. But in the 1990s, an unlikely spokesperson was championing a vessel that could break speed records and promote clean energy. And she lived in the English countryside. The Countess of Arran was the ultimate speed demon. In 1980, she set the record for the fastest woman on water after clocking around 165 kilometres an hour in her powerboat. In 1989, she clinched another world speed record, this time travelling quietly at over 81 kilometres an hour in an environmentally friendly electric boat.
Now, let me show you where our mighty atoms are. They're very, very small, but full of power. They're no bigger, really, than a large soup plate.
When you think about it, a focus on efficiency is part of what's really pushed us to electric vehicles. And as we all know, they have a much higher torque than your regular petrol vehicle. In that way, they're much faster.
So these 4 small engines got you going that fast?
That they did, and they're going to get us going faster, I hope, still. We hope to do the 100 kilometres with it, which is 62 miles an hour.
And Cedric Lynch's innovative design was key to its success.
Its efficiency is maintained over a very wide range of power. That is, it takes very little current to run it with no load on it.
It's the shape of a disc instead of a barrel in a conventional motor. Now, the large surface area of this disc helps with the cooling of the motor, and also it acts as a bit of a fan as it turns around, and that also helps with cooling. The other aspect to this disc is that you can have magnets on both sides, and that means that it will operate at half the speed, but also will have twice the pull.
Traditional motor racing of any form, whether it's air, land or water, is diesel, petrol, fumes, rubber, lots and lots of hype, lots of big noise. Using an electric boat, very, very different. I think it sort of went out to a different group of people, and people that were really interested in technology as well. Still going fast across water, but silently.
It's lovely to go along in complete silence instead of the roaring of the engines.
But not fast enough for you?
Not for sheer pleasure. But we're going to get it fast enough, I think.
People like Countess Aaron are so important for innovation because they're like patrons of the art. Instead of trying to make something commercially viable, they're more invested in putting their money on something that they're passionate about.
We know the 90s were a time of innovation on the water, but they were also a time of imagination, as fanciful fusion vessels took centre stage. Like the aptly named Airfish.
There's no doubting that this is a hybrid. Try and describe it, and you have to keep swapping between boating terms and aeroplane terms. For a start, you talk of a wingspan. It's 7.5 metres, with these winglets fully extended for stability. All up, there are 3 wings or aerofoils, including the tail. But just like any conventionally hulled boat, it has sponsons.
Airfish's ducted fan provided forward propulsion, and as it accelerated past 25 kilometres an hour, the ground effect created lift, and at 65 kilometres an hour, it took to the air.
Here it's described as looking like a bat, but for me, it looked like an albatross. An albatross is a marine bird that is a supreme glider. The way it just gently cruised over the ocean made me think of that incredible species.
The Airfish cruised at around a metre above the surface of the water, benefiting from the cushion of air created by ground effect. And with a 45-litre fuel capacity, it got an astounding 300-kilometre range.
We're often looking to invent things that evolution has already got there on. And when it comes to flight, that's something that birds and bats had down well before humans did. So looking to the way that a bird might fly over the water or that an animal may take off from the ground, we can learn a lot from what they do and then bring that into our inventiveness.
While it seemed like a vessel for a joyride, the Airfish is up to its 8th incarnation, with a Singaporean company buying the intellectual property rights to bring the Flying Airfish 8 to market. In flight, speed was exhilaration, as innovation saw us travel through the air faster than ever before.
I think humans have always had a fascination with flight even before it was possible for us. We have had this desire to be in the sky.
In the 80s, hobby pilots were the beneficiaries of a host of inventions that allowed them to take matters into their own hands. Literally. If the 60s was the golden age of air travel, and the 70s was about accessibility, the 80s brought something new. In 1979, the Stoddard Hamilton Aviation Company created the world's first pre-moulded composite kit plane. Called the Glacier, it was the sleekest, fastest kit plane on the market, and you could build it yourself.
So getting a pilot's license is hard, it's expensive to do, but even if you do it, you need a plane, and getting a private plane is pretty expensive to do. So this really was the start of that concept of getting a pilot's license, but having a plane that you can take wherever you want to go see the things you want to see without having to spend mega dollars.
The downside, it took a few thousand hours of assembly to produce a plane.
You don't want to have bits left over, and to me, if I had finished the plane and there was a bunch of screws and bolts sitting there, I'd probably want to start from scratch again to make sure it was okay. Thankfully with these planes, they aren't flying at high altitude, so things like pressurization are less important, and it means that you can still achieve airworthiness, and you're going to know pretty quickly whether it is holding together or not.
The way that we construct the Glacier is different from the way the first composite airplanes were introduced. They were introduced where a person would take a block of foam, shape the foam to the desired shape, and then skin it with fiberglass laminates, and then do a lot of sanding and finishing work to get the ultimate shape and surface finish that they would want. In the case of our glass airs, we build female tooling, and we build the airplane from the outside in, so that that surface finish is guaranteed for each individual customer. The airplane comes finished that way.
Ultimately, the glass air was about freedom, shooting into the sky at 300 feet a minute and travelling at 200 miles an hour. And for those who liked fun, well, they were built for that too. If you didn't want to take the controls yourself, there was another way to travel for the upwardly mobile. By private jet. Or more specifically, the Cessna Citation 10.
I think it was probably more of a status symbol back in the 90s, and I think people thought that they could get faster from A to B than they could on domestic aircraft.
Especially since the Cessna was the fastest business aircraft at that time.
Well, we're now at 37,000 feet, and we're flying at 0.911 of a Mach. That's almost the speed of sound. That speed, we're flying faster than any other commercial jet aircraft in the world, with the sole exception of Concorde, which is, of course, a supersonic aircraft. At this rate, we'll get from south-central Kansas into Colorado in 10 minutes.
The Citation 10 was the first business jet to be designed electronically, allowing for a more powerful craft that was also more fuel efficient.
It's this computational fluid dynamics software which has made the Citation 10 possible. Well, given the fundamental design changes required to enable this aircraft to fly at transonic speeds, that whole process would have been incredibly costly, both in terms of money and time. Without this technology, almost certainly the Citation 10 would never have got off the drawing board, let alone the ground.
These are still popular today, so I think that's a big testament to how they were able to come up with a design that really brought together the affordability for that uber-rich luxury level of society, but also the safety measures.
Competition can drive innovation. Which is perhaps why the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale organised races that crowned the speed kings and queens of the skies.
Humans love to break records. We always want to push the envelope. We want to be bigger and faster and stronger and go taller. I mean, this has been around since the dawn of time.
In 1986, the Rutan brothers broke the distance record, building and flying the first plane to fly non-stop around the world.
The Rutans are now chasing another goal: to build and fly the fastest piston-powered plane in the world. But in this endeavour, they have a new challenge in the form of competition in what's developing into a duel in the desert.
It was the Pond Racer versus the Rare Bear. While the Rare Bear was a repurposed Navy fighter plane, the Pond Racer was built from scratch.
It was designed for one specific thing, and that was to be a pylon air racer and fly at 430 knots. So its airfoils, its shape, everything is optimized for just that one speed.
10 years after their world distance record, technology had kept pace with the Rutans. Now, after each test flight, information such as stress loading was downloaded onto a computer for analysis. This enabled them to learn as much as they could to tweak the Pond Racer's design and maximise speed. The Pond Racer made its debut at the Reno Air Show in 1991, but lost the gold to Rare Bear, who set a race record of 481 miles an hour. But these decades weren't only about using powered machines to skim the water or speed through the air. They were also about pushing the limits of human speed, endurance and excitement.
Extreme sports in the 90s, they were really coming to a head. The adrenaline junkies were finding their tribe. It was BMX freestyling, base jumping, snowboarding, and people were taking chances. The old part of the brain, I think it's called the amygdala. That's the fight or flight area of your brain. And I think those people have a very inactive amygdala because they take extreme chances.
This era allowed us to feel the wind on our face as extreme sports became more accessible. And Carmel Travers learnt there was no excuse not to get on board.
I'll stand up and I'll lift your legs clear of the floor of the aircraft. I'll then say, cross your heart.
Right.
What that means,
Doesn't mean crying.
let go of the grip and do that.
Right.
I'll keep your elbows in, hands there, head back. Push your hips forward.
Right.
And keep your feet curled back up between my legs.
Well, as you've probably gathered, I've never done this before. And you've just witnessed the only instruction that I'm going to have before this jump. For anyone who's ever considered doing parachuting or a bit of skydiving, you probably know that usually a minimum of 8 hours tuition is required before the first jump. Well, I'm going to do it with 5 minutes tuition, but not only that, Gary's going to let me do it without a parachute. So we'll see how it all works.
Tandem skydiving allowed just anybody to take part in what was really, before then, a pretty extreme sport. Tandem skydiving meant that the training was minimal and also you could trust someone who had a lot of experience, which meant that it's something you could do in an afternoon.
We're up at about 5,000 feet now and just getting ready to jump. We'll be free falling for around about 1,000 feet, and then Gary, with whom I'm actually locked in tandem with the harness, will then open the canopy. Gary assures me that during the free fall, we'll hit a speed of around 240 kilometers an hour. I don't know what that's going to feel like, but probably like nothing I've ever felt before. Right, set,
Right.
How's that go? Oh, I had no idea I was falling.
Oh my God, I can't believe I've just done that. That was the most fantastic experience. It was just like being a bird out there. Was it a good one?
Congratulations, skydiver.
Thank you, thank you.
But if you found yourself a little closer to the ground, there was still a way to soar through the sky. In 1992, skiting was a new sport that took a number of kites stacked together and the power of the wind to propel you off the ground and into the air.
Well, skiting. Who would have thought? I don't know if I would have been lying in bed one night and said to myself, I'm going to put 3 kites on top of each other and try and lift myself off the ground wearing a hockey helmet and see how high I could jump. I don't know if I would have done that, but hey, these guys did and they loved it.
The kites can reach speeds of up to 180 kilometres an hour, so riders had to be mindful of the force of the wind and the number of kites stacked on top of each other. Skiting never really gained traction, but adrenaline junkies were offered other options in the extreme sports slate. Like off-road skateboarding, with thrill seekers taking to the hills for a radical downhill ride.
What's taken this from ramps to rugged ranges is a new set of tyres. Gone is the polyurethane, replaced by solid rubber with a chunky directional tread. And the space between the board and the wheels has been increased, which helps you to clear obstacles on any terrain. So basically, the skateboard's been given a four-wheel drive attitude.
While skateboarding had been seen as a counterculture activity, the 90s saw it move into the mainstream. Taking skateboards off-road was another way to keep the thrills coming. At least for some.
Even on your regular skateboard surfaces, these new tyres can give you a smoother ride. The experts here tell me the board is more stable, which of course gives greater safety. Blah. And if you're not a rider, but happen to live near one, you'll be pleased to hear that the rubber tread also makes for a quieter ride.
Even the humble bike got amped up to accommodate a popular new pastime. Mountain biking. A fledgling sport in the early 80s, by 1995, it was one of the fastest growing recreational trends in the world.
Extreme sports had an air of being cool and young, and I think that's why we started to see a lot of crossover sports that kind of gave people the ability to feel some of that rush without experiencing all of the risk.
In less than 15 years, sales have soared from 0 to around 20 million bikes a year. And that figure's expected to double by the turn of the century. To keep up with the rapidly expanding demand, not to mention the grueling punishment these bikes are put through, manufacturers are taking to the technology fast track to see how far they can push this design.
At Cannondale's Connecticut offices, graphic workstations could turn a technical drawing into a 3D model on screen. And the info could be sent down a phone line to their production line 500 kilometres away.
When the design modification is received here at the factory, the production coordinator checks it against the current specifications for that model and then makes the change right here on the computer. Once he's done that, the software automatically reconfigures the geometry of the entire frame to accommodate that change. And all that takes a matter of just a few minutes.
This advanced computer technology increased Cannondale's output fivefold. It also streamlined the time in which a bike went from a sketch to the mudslicks of the great outdoors. But how to increase the thrills and the speed of mountain biking? Just wait for winter.
So extreme sport is something that has been in our vernacular since the 90s. It is this idea that you're not just doing sport, it's something with real stakes, and it's actually your life or your safety that's at stake.
By 1994, everything had been turned into an extreme sport. So, upping the ante led to the suicide bike.
What if we were to put the two in a box, mountain bike and snowboard, and close it and shake it up and see what would come out? First, it was a lot of proving and disproving theories on paper, and then we said, hey, we're just going to make it. And I went out to the shop and just started welding stuff together.
I think the idea of being able to combine different sports and make something that felt familiar yet new really appealed to people. It felt like reimagining the world.
With a lightweight aluminium frame and carbon laminate skis, was this the future of alpine extreme sports?
Now, it's not as simple as just sticking a bike frame on a set of skis. You need stability, and that's provided by these modified snowboards here, which are wide, so they have plenty of contact with the snow. There's also suspension, which should ensure that even a beginner like me can hug the mountain all day long. You know, I've never skied before,
I've hardly ever seen snow. So either I'm quite good at this, or the more plausible explanation is it's quite simple, because it really is very stable. And I do feel just like I'm riding a bike.
While the suicide bike remained at prototype stage, there were faster ways to get down a mountain. In 1985, that took the form of the Flying Kilometre, held at Les Arcs ski resort in France. Here, you could witness the fastest self-propelled humans on the planet. Careering down the slopes at close to 200 kilometres an hour, these men and women were going faster than if they'd jumped from the Empire State Building.
Well, this strange-looking helmet is just part of the gear that allows the racers to achieve such extraordinary speeds. It's fashioned to minimise pressure drag so that the airflow rushes over the racer's head and smoothly down their backs. The racing suit is fashioned from a high-sheen plastic. It's completely airtight, but it's also extremely flimsy, so it offers the racers virtually no protection in the event of a high-speed fall. And the projections at the rear of the calves is also to minimise pressure drag. That's the wind vortices or eddies that build up at high speed behind the racers' backs.
Today, racers wear very similar outfits during the Flying Kilometre at the same ski resort 40 years later. The current fastest time is now just over 250 kilometres an hour.
I think in the 90s it was more on more. You tried to do another level. You had a kite, but let's put 3 kites on. You had the opportunity to jump out of an aeroplane with a parachute on. Let's not do that. Let's actually make a wingsuit or something like that. Human beings are doing that. They always want to take it to the next level and they always want to push themselves, and the adrenaline is so addictive.
Back on dry land, cars, bikes and trains became high-speed symbols of this age of technological innovation. Like Bugatti's automobiles, which had been synonymous with speed for over a century.
Bugatti, what a brand. They have been reinventing the extraordinary since 1909. They are an Italian piece of, oh my goodness, they are just incredible. I just love them. I get goosebumps even talking about them.
After a long hiatus, the Bugatti brand was revived in the mid-80s. And by 1991, they had created the EB110, the world's fastest production vehicle.
I think in the 80s, scientists got a lot better at developing materials that were lightweight, that were really strong. We also got better at developing coatings, for example, that would reduce friction so things could move faster. So that meant that what we ended up with were things that were faster, were safer, were stronger, but also lighter.
It roared into the record books with a speed of 342 kilometres an hour. And its sibling, the EB110 Supersport, broke that record the next year with a speed of 351 kilometres an hour.
I'm no test driver and this isn't a racetrack, but even at a modest speed, the EB110 Supersport is a real pleasure to drive. However, it's not exactly designed for family outings. So Bugatti, in an effort to satisfy those customers who want to show off their driving in front of a larger audience, are embracing a new challenge. In keeping with the Bugatti tradition, they're planning to produce a sports sedan, a car that will satisfy the most discerning connoisseur, but at the same time be spacious, luxurious, and the fastest saloon car in the world.
The powerful EB112 was named after the Bugatti founder, Ettore Bugatti. Created by famed automotive designer Giorgetto Giugiaro, it was created with a dual purpose of speed and elegance.
In accordance with Giugiaro's design concept, the engine is set further back than usual, behind the front wheels. That puts it closer to the vehicle's centre of gravity, improving the weight distribution, handling, and it provides a more direct transmission of power to all 4 wheels.
The production model accelerated from 0 to 100 in just over 4 seconds. and had a maximum speed of 300 kilometres an hour. Bugatti is still innovating today.
In the late 90s, Bugatti was sold to the Volkswagen Group, and the Volkswagen Group owns brands like Porsche, Audi, Lamborghini, so it is really a performance brand at its heart. So it is really cool to see that the brand has completely evolved from its roots, and they're now making cars that are extremely expensive, extremely desirable, and really just icons of the automotive age.
Speed is intoxicating. And race car driving is the epitome of speed. With an adrenaline-fueled blend of precision and split-second decision-making on display. So when it came to crowning a winner, it was often hard to tell who flashed past the finish line first. Swiss watch brand Heuer had developed the automatic car identification system in the late 70s, but in 1990, an Australian company went a step further.
So Calder Park, the Thunderdome, it's a track that has been in Melbourne for decades and decades. And when races were held there, it was hard to actually discriminate between cars crossing the line.
The system uses radio transmitters, one for each car, like this one over here, that's connected to a steel block antenna that's bolted on the underneath side of the car. And the transmissions are picked up by small antenna embedded at various points around the track.
So this OzTime device was able to basically break up any vehicles that cross the line, so you get precision timing. That means that you can determine not only which car was first, but then how much faster it was than the car behind it, and then so on and so forth.
The Thunderdome system spreads several antennae across the entire width of the track. And you can see that right here, the lines are where they're buried underneath the tarmac. And there are 7 different antenna locations like this one at various points around the track. And at each of them, the lines are connected back up to the race control and computer room over there.
By providing information like the speeds of entry and exit from curves and the actual trajectory of each car through the curves, it seemed that speed could be unwound and dissected for the very first time.
It was so effective that they're using this technology now around the world. In this day and age, this type of stuff is incredibly important. You've got rally where you've got minutes, tens of minutes between vehicles, that's easy enough to cater for. But in Formula One, where it could be 0.01 of a second between 2 vehicles and determining a starting position at qualifying, I mean, it is critical that this is absolutely dead accurate.
Motor racing continued to benefit from the technological advances of the 1990s.
The introduction of computer design also allowed quick design that looked at the aerodynamics of something without having to prototype it in real life over and over again. This allowed for an iterative design process that was much faster and could accomplish much more in a shorter period of time.
But to access it, they had to look down at their dash hundreds of times during a race.
Even a sophisticated car like this has a dashboard, and just like the one in the family car, it tells the driver how the car is running mechanically. Information here dictates how the race must be run. Even the bravest drivers are slowed by falling oil pressure, and it's better to finish the race last than to have the engine blow up through inattention to the gauges.
Fraser Nash, an English company, came up with a system lifted from fighter jet protocol to project information right into the driver's line of sight.
There's a light-emitting diode at the base of this cylinder that's linked to the electronics of the engine system. And information from there is projected through here into the driver's field of vision. There'd be no point developing a projection system this close to the driver's face if he had to refocus to see it. Readjusting focus from the track to here and back again takes at least 1 second. And every second is 100 metres of high-speed travel. 100 metres where the driver isn't looking where he's going. This head-up display has been developed in such a way that the image is in focus and appears to be fixed some distance in front of the car.
Heads-up displays crossed over to the mainstream in the early 2000s, when they were first offered in luxury cars. Today, the feature is standard in more cars each year.
This was a fabulous invention because the same issues that these drivers were facing, we face every day on the road. And that's why they were so widely adopted, because it meant that people could keep their eyes on the road and get a little bit of information that they needed about what their car was doing.
But if you preferred taking the train, there was no faster one than the ICE, or the Intercity Experimental Train in Germany.
The transportation innovations of the 80s and 90s were not just about getting us where we needed to go faster and safer as individuals, but it was also about speeding up mass transportation, enabling lots of people to get where they needed to go faster and more efficiently.
Fast trains weren't new. The Japanese Shinkansen had been in operation since the 60s, followed in the early 80s by the French TGV. But the German ICE train was an upgrade.
On the outside, the ICE resembles a beam of white light being shot through the landscape. On the inside, it looks just a little like Cape Canaveral's Mission Control. At peak performance, the ICE will be moving so fast that mechanical signals, for example, will be out of the question. So computers on board will download data to receivers located along the tracks, monitoring the train's status at any given time. In front of me, there's a video tech service which is constantly updated with travel information, tourist information of attractions just outside the window, and times of arrival. There's one other significant addition here with the Deutsches Bundesbahn credit card. I can call the office anywhere in the world at any time, even when we're in the tunnels. This must be the fastest phone on wheels. Hi, Mum.
In 1988, the Intercity Experimental Train set the new land speed record for railed vehicles with a speed of around 406 kilometres an hour, a record which remained until 1990. This original train was the blueprint for the current German Intercity Express trains that crisscross Germany and throughout Europe. If the fastest thing on two wheels was more your speed, you only had to look at Japan in 1993.
This is not just some beautiful machine. The Honda NR750 is the product of 14 years of research and development. More money was spent on creating the perfect engineering design with this bike than on any other bike in Honda's history. Why? Because Honda have taken up an extraordinary challenge. The engine that makes this bike potentially the fastest thing on two wheels today represents an evolutionary stepping stone towards a new era in motoring technology.
The hype centred around Honda's redesigned combustion engine. While pistons had been an integral part of engines since the early 19th century, in 1993, Honda flipped the script.
In a really elegant piece of lateral thinking, the engineers here at Honda have replaced two circular pistons with a single oval piston. By doing away with the two cylinder walls in the centre here, they've reduced the surface area and the friction by a dramatic 25%.
This was an incredible motorbike because it lived in an era where people were always trying to get small advantages in racing. And in this particular instance, there were limitations on the number of cylinders, but not the displacement. So what Honda did was come up with a piston that was an oval shape. And it meant that they were able to get more displacement in comparison to their peers. So as a technology, it was incredible, and it was cool to see a bit of innovation and thinking around the edges to make this kind of thing work.
The added gain of removing the two cylinder walls in the middle here is that it gives the valves, especially the four in the centre, much more room to operate in. That means they can allow in larger quantities of the air-fuel mixture, generating greater power.
Speed seems to be woven in our DNA, reflecting a human desire for progress and exploration.
I think speed is unlike any other physical sensation that we ever experience. It really takes us to another world and in some ways feels so wrong yet so right.
Part thrill-seeking, part ambition. On land, sea and sky, speed continues to shape our world.
When we get behind the wheel, we are going beyond our own human nature. There is something that kicks in your brain. There's these synapses that just connect, that give you the most incredible feeling. And it is something that is nowhere else on the planet. Speed is addictive.